That's it based on job
Right.
description. But as you know, the office is what you make it.
Right.
We know that the job description laid out in the Constitution and under Arkansas law does not talk a lot about or at all
Mhm.
about a policy role.
Okay.
But I would remind folks that the last two lieutenant governors ran talking about a specific policy that they favored. And whether you like that policy or not, both of them got it passed into law. So my point is, you don't have to look in ancient history. You can look in recent history and see that there is the ability to use that office to pursue public policy goals. And I intend, if blessed to be elected, honored to be elected, then that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to advocate. Look, I don't agree with the lottery idea. But the lieutenant governor, two lieutenant governors ago, said that's what he wanted to do.
Right.
And last time I checked, we have a lottery in Arkansas. So he used the pulpit of that office to pursue that and to get it into law. Again, I don't like that law, but that's not the point. The point is, and I've had some reporters say, well, there's nothing in the law about policy. Why are you talking about policy? And I said to that reporter, well, because the last two lieutenant governors talked about policy, and both of them got it enacted.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that I think it's important to listen to what the lieutenant governor candidates have to say about policy. So you're right. There is no vote, but there is the ability to articulate where you think you can improve Arkansas. And one of those areas that I've talked about is on the policy side is to use what I've learned in the Ways and Means Committee about a tax code, the federal tax code, and use what I've learned about that to advocate for a pro-jobs, pro-growth tax code. I was in Texarkana the other day, and we were talking about the state income tax and its impact on them and their exemption. You're familiar with the exemption. Why do they have an exemption? Under the fundamental understanding underlying that exemption, it is this, and I think Democrats and Republicans in the State House would agree with this description. If Arkansas has that exemption, they can be more competitive with Texas. Is that fair? Right? Well, that tells me that there's general consensus that tax laws impact our ability to be competitive. That is a open recognition that our tax laws impact our ability to either be competitive, more competitive, or less competitive. Tax laws can make you help create an environment where you grow jobs or lose jobs. And if you believe that for Texarkana, Texas versus Texarkana, Arkansas, it seems to me logical to say, well, that applies to Texas versus Arkansas. Does it not? So we're not just competing internationally. We're competing versus Texas. We're competing versus Louisiana. We're competing versus all of the states around us in the region. Some might say all over the country, but particularly in the region, because we share right to work state status, which is that's one reason a lot of jobs, a lot of businesses want to move down to our part of the country and have done over the last few decades. So I believe that we need to, and this is not something we just need to do because it's just that time. I think we should always be looking at our tax code, looking at our regulations, looking at our laws, and saying, do these help us achieve our goals? Do these help us grow jobs? Do these help us compete? How can we make them better? how can we make our entire tax system, not just income tax, how can we make our entire tax system make more sense? How can we make it less complex? How can we make it fairer in terms of the distribution? Who pays and who doesn't, right? We know a sales tax is particularly regressive. We've made some steps in recent years on that. But look, we've always got to be looking at that. And I think our approach in recent memory has been, don't make any fundamental changes to the tax code. Just try to use a lot of sweeteners to get people here. I think most people would agree with that that's generally been the approach. I'm all for using whatever we can use to get companies to come here. But that should be the icing. They should be attracted first and foremost because our fundamental structure is one that lends itself to growing jobs. And so I think that's a different approach. I haven't heard in the last X number of years any really bold plans for completely reforming our tax code. I haven't heard that. What I've heard is we're going to give some incentives here, we're going to give some tax breaks here, we may build you this here. And look, if that's what it takes to get them here, I'm for that. But it'll take a lot less of that if you have an underlying structure that has a big welcome sign on it to jobs. And that's what I think we ought to be focused on. I'm going to be rolling out some specifics on this as the year goes on. But I want to use what I've learned in my and the experiences I've had and the relationships that I've developed to help grow jobs and make sure that we're doing what we ought to be doing to grow jobs here. The other thing I would say is, and just real quickly, I know I've taken a lot of your time. Yeah, I think there's some straightforward things. They're not massive changes, but I think there's straightforward things we can do to restore some trust to the office. Number one, I think we can spend less in that office. I think we can do more with less. One thing, I use this example in my congressional office. A lot of people in my district wanted a second office because the far reaches of my district have to drive all the way into Little Rock. Right. So I heard them say that, and I thought, well, to look at putting one in Conway. That way it's more accessible to Faulkner and Perry and Conway County and Van Buren County. But I told my staff we're not going to spend more money. So we looked at ways to innovate, and here's what we did. We said, wait a minute, the space that we inherited from my predecessor is too much. We don't need all that space. So we cut it in almost half. We saved about $18,000 a year, something like that. We found a place in Conway for about $13,000 a year. So we were able to reduce expenses and add an office. I think we could do more with less. And it may be less staff. I've talked about trimming one or two from the staff. But just send a signal that I respect the taxpayers' hard-earned dollar. And so that's one thing we can do. It's pretty straightforward. It's not particularly complicated, but it can be done, I think, in pretty short order. Certainly the legislature decides on the budget, but whether to fill up a slot, I think there'd probably be some discretion there. The other thing I would say is, look, I drive my own self. I don't have anybody with me today. I drove myself down here. Sometimes I drive if I'm going to be on the phone, so I'm not violating the law. And I'm safe. But I would never ask the state police to provide personal transportation to me. They've got better things to do with their time and resources, just wouldn't do that. And so I think that, again, that's a pretty straightforward deal. It's not going to change the world, but I think it would send a signal that I'm dedicated to restoring trust. So I talked about the policy stuff I was interested in, restoring trust, and thirdly, I'd say this. Some people say, well, we ought to get rid of the office. Well, first of all, I think it's a bad idea. I think there is a role for the office. I think the office can be, based on who's in it, an advocate for some good things. I've talked about that in the policy context. But also, I like to think about why the office is there. The office is there to have a backup in case something happens with the governor. The governor could get a promotion, like President Clinton, right? He became president. The governor could get in trouble. There have been some examples of that. Or governor, God forbid, could have some sort of health issue. So why that and not a legislator? I think the governor is elected statewide. Mm-hmm. I think the person that becomes governor potentially ought to be elected statewide. Because yes, you could have a state representative or whatever from a smaller corner of the state become governor. But when people elect that state representative, they certainly aren't going through the analysis of, do I want this person to be my governor? Because first of all, if you say hypothetically chose the speaker, well, most of the time, unless the person's already speaker, they may not know when they're voting for that person whether that person's going to become speaker. Mm-hmm. So I mean, it makes sense to me that if you're going to have a backup for the governor, they ought to be elected the way the governor is statewide. And it's analogous, not the same, but analogous to a vice president. So I think that makes sense. And I would also say that I wanted to just mention from a political standpoint that Lisa Ann Rockefeller is my campaign chair. Very proud of that. I knew Wayne Rockefeller. He was an honorable man, and I believe he used his name. Not many people have a name like that. I think he used his name and he used his blessings, and I think he would have been the first to tell you he was just generously blessed. I think he used that to help the state. We all have something that God has given us, whether it be the people we know, material blessings some people have, relationships that people have developed. Whatever that is, I believe that can be used for good in that office. And you can be a resource. I would like to be a resource, to be a partner, to be a problem solver, a team player with the governor and the legislature. I know a lot of those people. I know them very well. I certainly know Asa. I've endorsed Asa. I haven't been quiet about that. I've known his son for a long time. I know him. Known him for 20-something years. I know Mike Ross from the Congress. I know a lot of the legislature. A lot of them, I get to know, particularly in my district, Democrat and Republican, because they're constituents, and their constituents need help with something. And let me tell you, one of the number one things that I do is assist with navigating the federal bureaucracy. Yeah, and so that's, we do that for people, constituents. I could help do that for the state, but I just think there's a lot of opportunity. I'm excited about it because I get to live at home and serve.
Right.
I got a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, and anybody who genuinely knows me, I don't mean met me one time, but genuinely knows me, not just saw a commercial or something, but knows me, knows how critical my family is to me, it means a lot to be able to say that I'm going to be here in the state. I live less than a handful of miles from the Capitol, and so that's really important. I would also point out on that other issue about electing somebody that you can see in the role as governor, if God forbid needed to do that. We've had two times in the last 22 years. 2 times in the last 22 years. I think that's right. Where the lieutenant governor has become the governor. So this is not a hypothetical out of the air. I mean, this is reality. Highly unlikely that would happen again, but it happened twice, and